Hello and welcome to Reanimators. It's episode 300. Holy shnikes!
Wow.
We made it. H.A. Conrad's with me. This is Stuart, and Kyle's not with us this week, but he might be back for others. If you missed him, Kyle Diaz, a longtime friend of the show, was on last week to talk about what if zombies and Ashen of the North, two projects that I think we all kind of liked a fair amount.
Yeah.
And then so this week we are moving on to a Netflix film, Blood Red Sky. It's gonna be an interesting conversation too. There's not a huge amount of news this week, but HA, what did you dug something up? What do you think?
Well, I mean, this is just following up on, the what if train. Everybody got really excited about it and has been excited about it, I guess, so much so that Mark Millar was teasing some ideas of like a live action version of said series. You and I talked a little bit about this, and there's probably like 5 or 6 articles about this speculating, and I really do think it's just that is speculation.
Yeah, it's wishful thinking.
I just don't think that there is like I don't know. I just don't know that there's an appetite for it, but we'll see. I mean, and just even in the way that it's teased, I almost feel like they're trying to see if they can get enough people excited about it. So we'll keep you posted on that, but I'm not totally convinced that this is something that they would do. But then again, it's the MCU, and I am always sort of shocked at the amount of content they put out. So what we would I will reserve judgment until we actually see some thing one way or the other. But yeah, anyway,
I would agree with that diagnosis. This is like maybe an interest check, but also it's just people being like, oh, but maybe now we can. So we'll see.
People weren't totally upset about the zombie superheroes or something like that, but I feel like they might be more upset if it was live action, don't you? I don't know.
Yeah, I think definitely. And plus, how are you going to get Chris Evans and all these people to be maybe they'd be into it, but I feel like it might be a stretch.
Agreed.
A couple of shows have come back or come around for the first time, and I wanted to just quickly mention them. The first one is Why the Last Man, which is on Hulu now, or actually I think it's on FX, but Hulu is streaming it. And this is a show that's been in production one way or another for, I don't know, like a decade. Apparently it had a bit of a tortured route to the screen, but it aired on the 13th of September. The first 3 episodes were all put up on Hulu. And then it's going to come out weekly after that, which I think is what they did with The Boys on Amazon. It's an interesting premise. It's, I don't think it's spoiling anything. The conceit is fairly well known. All the men die. Everyone with a Y chromosome all dies pretty much on the same day, and not just men, but also all mammals. And so when this story was written, I guess it was kind of like, okay, all the men are dead, and now the story is going to be about this one guy who didn't die and his pet monkey who also didn't die. And that's like that's the focus of the comic book. But in this show in 2021, as opposed to whenever, I don't really know when it was written. But now the story is a lot more about like, okay, all the men are dead, and what does a world of women look like? And what are the impacts of all of these male presenting people without Y chromosomes? What's their role in this new society, right? And so I think it's actually taking a fairly nuanced and modern take on what was originally kind of more of like a basic story. Not super basic, but either way, it's got a lot of end of the world dystopian flavor, which HA, I know that you enjoy. And so I would put you on notice that I think you should watch it.
Oh, I just looked up the comic, and it does sound familiar to me. So I have not read it. So, and it was like in the early aughts, and it ran through 2002 to 2008. And it's a Vertigo comic. So definitely in line with their sort of, it makes sense that it's a Vertigo comic.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, this definitely sounds interesting to me, so I'll definitely check it out. Your recommendation, as you know, I hold in high esteem, so I will certainly, I'll add it to my list of things to watch without Bill.
Well, it's certainly not a zombie show, and you know what, if you get past the initial end of the world stuff, maybe Bill would also really enjoy it. We'll see. I mean, also the cast. I mean, Diane Lane is the
Oh yeah,
is like the one of the the female leads,
she's
and
awesome.
is doing a bang up job. And the other show that has come back is a Netflix series called Into the Night. I believe I talked about it the first time the first season came out, and it was the premise there is that the sun is killing everybody, and you have to stay in the nighttime for it not to kill you. In the first season, was mostly set on a plane, which kind of ties in. So the movie we're going to be talking about, also the premise, trying to fly westward and staying in the nighttime so that the sun wouldn't kill you. And like landing and refueling at different places. And what made that show very interesting to me was it was very international. They were speaking French and Polish and and all kinds of different, and German, Italian, and English. And I enjoy those sorts of international ensembles. And then the story was entertaining and very very energized. And now the second season starts, and their situation has certainly changed, and like, so I'm just there for it. It's a lot of fun, even if all this end of the world stuff can get a little overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, well, I will definitely check both out. So thank you for the Rex. But without further ado, I think we should talk about Blood Red Sky and celebrate our 300th episode in style. I don't know. I don't know how you do that. But this is a horror film, more of a vampire theme, directed by Peter Thorwarth. And it was released in like late July. And this is it's a German film, or at least that's the main but there's also some English mixed in, so
a lot, actually. I'd say this feels like a German production designed to be attractive to an international audience.
Well, you know what it also felt like? It almost felt like it was like a test pilot for a series or something. So it wouldn't shock me to hear that they somehow turn this into a series later on or something like that. It just feels like it's got all the fixings to do that. But and I would just say, just my sort of overall feeling about it is that I think that there's some really good ideas with this, and unfortunately not the best execution. But it was still like a really fun watch. And so and it was I think, we can talk about this when we like kind of go through our review, but I did like the cast. I thought they were great, and there was like some familiar faces in there. Most notably Graham, for me anyway. Graham McTavish. It's always kind of fun to see him in things, and it was kind of odd. Like, he wasn't in like a lot of this. Like, he was it sort of almost was like they had wasted him a little bit in this. But it was still nice to see him nonetheless.
He's a little bit one note, isn't he, as an actor? I mean, I only know him also from Outlander, I think it's called.
Yeah, but
he's like Uncle Dougal.
He's kind of the same dude in everything. I mean, he's what it's what it is.
He's a bit of an angry grandpa, and
Yeah.
he's kind of always that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, he bookends this movie. He's like there at the beginning, kind of being curt with people, and then he's there at the end also. Well, being curt and then incredulous.
Yeah. And I mean, I always appreciate his facial hair because he uses it
beautiful
to good effect. So I really like him a lot. So anyway,
other standouts in the cast, and also we should mention, not only directed by Peter Thorwarth, but also written by him and conceived of by him apparently on a flight from Europe to the US.
Yeah.
He like had this idea while he was on that flight, because I guess, he's like, I took off at nighttime and I landed at nighttime. It's amazing.
Yeah, and
so
this is a theme that like they have a whole thing about that, which is kind of funny. But it also it definitely has like a bit of a Snakes on the Plane vibe, which
very much thematically, very much.
Which, by the way, I have never watched because just hate them. But
the snakes or bad movies.
Hate snakes. So that's not something I was gonna watch. Although
when I saw the premiere, not the premiere, the trailer for this, I could have sworn the female lead was Noomi Rapace, the actress from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo movies. I could have sworn it was her. But no, I couldn't have been more wrong. That's like me thinking that freaking Jason Momoa was in the Snowpiercer TV show, which absolutely he wasn't. It's a German lady named Perry Baumeister, and I don't think I've seen anything else with her in it, but she, I think, does as good a job as you can with a lot of prosthetics and some grunting. There's a fair amount of grunting from her that has to happen in the middle of the film. And then Dominic Purcell is to me the most recognizable member of this cast in a way to an American audience. You know, Uncle Dougal being accepted. Dominic Purcell was the big beefy terrorist leader.
Yeah.
You know
And
who I'm
he's
talking
got
about? Yeah.
that, and he's got that voice.
He has a very deep voice. I don't think his voice is that deep in real life, but he was in Prison Break and he's in Legends of Tomorrow, I think, which is the DC like C-list villains TV show, which I haven't watched much of, but I know he's in that. And so it was kind of interesting to see him in this, and then Alexander Shea is the another German member of the cast who has a fairly large and significant role.
Yeah. And we'll talk a lot about him. Or not a lot about him, but this we'll talk about the terrorists, so to speak.
Terry's.
Yeah. It's anyway. So let's set the table here. So I do think that I loved like the kind of idea of this where they kind of set it up. I will say, like, just at the outset, they're like the way that they sort of have this whole scene, the opening scene begin. They got this little kid, Elias, running around an airport with luggage. And I will say,
oh no, the first scene of this film is actually,
oh, sorry,
like all that luggage stuff is a flashback. Most of this film is a flashback,
right.
And then sometimes you go flashback within flashback,
right. And we should
so
talk.
they've decided
We should talk about this because that is like,
it's not everybody's favorite way to watch stuff. We've definitely complained about it when they do this on shows and movies in the past. It didn't super bother me this time.
It didn't super bother me, but it just felt like really kind of sloppy and disjointed. And the pacing of it was kind of odd. But you're correct. Like the opening scene was actually like all this stuff happening, and then they kind of reconstruct it as you go through the film. But this is with Mr. McTavish doing his best to look authoritative, and there's a whole sort of emergency where it's a plane making an emergency landing, and it's pretty obvious what has happened or that something has happened, and the audience is kind of left to draw their own conclusions. You kind of see this person in the cockpit, like he had a kind of bumpy landing, and then you see him kind of hiding, and there's just like a lot of there's also a lot of yelling, like okay, get close to the plane. And
McTavish really wants to kill everybody.
Yeah,
he wants to kill the guy in the cockpit. He doesn't know who that guy is.
Right.
Like when you realize how little they know about what's happening here, the fact that he is so trigger happy to kill the guy flying the airplane is kind of bananas.
Well, it's bananas, and then the end is even more bananas when you think about that. So and they send like a whole team toward the plane, something's definitely weird. And then you've got this little kid shimmying down this rope in a way that's super bizarre. And I obviously, my mind is like, oh, there's something wrong with this weird little kid. And and you're kind of waiting for things. So I felt like they kind of set up this level of suspense. They did, like a good job where you were kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop with the kid. But
balancing Elias's introduction as he like shimmies down that, I think it's a parachute that he climbs down to get out of the airplane. And then he goes catatonic, right? He like doesn't speak until the end of the film, which is also who knows chronologically how much time he spends just being non-responsive.
Right.
He's taken like immediately to this clearly British or Scottish lady who speaks German with an English accent, who's trying to like get information from him about the hostage situation, but he's not answering. And then, which is frustrating because he has all the answers. He could start raising the alarm about what's going on the plane immediately, right? It must be morning. It can't be that late.
He could, but like he also, I mean, he's been through a lot, and also certainly. Who is going to believe him? And like, it seems a little crazy to be able to convey this. So I kind of felt like, but also he's catatonic. I will also say that like at one point I had to like pause this and come back, and I forgot that like what screen it was on, and it's like it was basically a still of him being all catatonic, and I enlarged the screen and I was like, whoa, this kid is like creepy looking.
Oh,
So they did a
he's
they
a
did a good
handsome
job
child.
with the makeup and
Um,
whatnot. But anyway,
as far as who's going to believe him, you say that, but this film also does make a choice to have people know what vampires are, right? This is it's like this comes up in our genre a lot. A lot of these movies happen in universes where there are no such thing as zombies, like The Walking Dead being example number one, right? Or any Romero project ever. But when they decide to make the monster a known entity, people know the rules, and clearly 8 Ball knows the rules in this movie because he's sharpening stakes very quickly after he puts it together later on in the film, right?
right, but I think that that's one of the big holes in this plot is that it's not other people don't believe him and it's unclear why he's able to get there so quickly. Like it's I mean maybe he's just totally psychotic
8 Ball, oh yeah, clear. I mean, they
and
did a good job of making that dude to
and he
be
was, but
insane.
he's so crazy in a way that it seems unreal that the others wouldn't have taken him in, like wouldn't take him out ASAP, you know, like they don't need him anymore. Why on earth would they keep him? But that was sort of weird to me, even how they had him put it together. So it wasn't clear to me that this is a universe where everybody knows what they are, or it's just some weird psychotic guy has managed to make the leap. And then others believe as they see obviously specific things happening. But he
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of
Fareed
makes
also makes the argument, like when they're talking about getting on the radio and talking to the airport, he's like, "What are we going to tell them, that we're on a plane full of vampires? They'll think we're crazy." So yes, like they're playing it from both sides, and I guess, if anybody were to get on air traffic control, modern day, and say, "I've got a plane full of vampires," they'd probably be like, "Sir, take your medicine and get off the radio." I imagine.
yeah, I feel like they did a great job in sort of giving you that suspense piece and withholding certain information and at least at first making the audience believe one thing, and it's sort of like definitely a little bit of like misdirection because they do the flashback with Elias, and very much it feels like his mom Nadia is dealing with cancer and she's going to get treatment in the United States. Like it all feels, but it's also a little weird. I mean, they got Elias running around this German airport, dropping off luggage on his own.
By himself.
And what I
Yeah.
was going to say is that it feels like a little odd that, you know, nobody would note this. Oh, I know Europe is a little different, but like finally his mom like shows up and you get that she's sick and you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe that makes sense, is that he's just kind of used to taking care of things for her because she isn't feeling so well and all that fun stuff. And you know she's got drugs that she's supposed to take, which could be like heavy duty painkillers or whatever. She's definitely clearly suffering. So I'm, you know, I felt like they did a great job at making it appear like what she was dealing with was like this long-term illness and that this was the whole purpose. So that was like a nice little setup. Didn't like what did you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen the trailer, so I kind of like I always knew exactly. Like, plus you
No,
see her with her. I mean, she's bald in a way that looks maybe different from. I don't know. Maybe you're supposed to think
I saw the
she's like a
trailer too, but
female.
I was trying to sort of put myself in the spot of somebody who didn't know what was coming, maybe.
Yeah, they do make her seem really sick. She's really shaky. Like she actually seems like she shouldn't be flying.
Yeah.
And Fareed is introduced during these scenes too as like the kindly stranger who's helping the kid lift his heavy luggage, and then talking to him about and Elias gives him a lecture on how it's going to be nighttime when
Yes.
they land.
Clearly the filmmaker, the director was like really into this idea.
Yeah,
And then I also liked a little bit a little bit of like, you know, they introduce you to some of these characters like 8 Ball. It starts out as like a flight attendant and you're like
completely unsuspecting.
you're
I I did not
and
see that
I
one coming.
liked the interaction. Like there's this obnoxious passenger and you know the other flight attendant was like, "Can you go take care of him for me?" They also with very little like dialogue or just like it's clear that he's new, so nobody else, you know, none of the other flight attendants know him. They're just like, "Oh, he's a stereotypical like gay guy and like he's going to take care of this." And he does like a great little like you know, I'm taking care of business here. Like he plays the flight attendant like role really well.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and so I was like definitely impressed by that part.
The Scottish guy and that female flight attendant are two examples of what this film I think does pretty nicely, which is having just a massive, comparatively massive cast of extras with speaking
Yep.
lines.
Yep.
And so like that Scottish businessman has multiple repeat lines to the point where you kind of understand his character.
Mhm.
That flight attendant, not as much, but then as the film goes on, more and more people have speaking
Yep.
lines, and you like, as other people like disappear off of the cast, more people are introduced.
Yeah, it's
And
interesting.
that's interesting because this film also feels a little too long, right? And I
It
think
does.
you said it drags a little bit, and it does. It's 2 hours long. It feels a little bit too long, but during that ride, you get to meet all these new people over and over, or not over and over again, but again and again, you're meeting new people. And I think that that's an interesting thing they
Yeah.
managed to do with the time that they had.
Even with the main, and they intersperse this with some of the main cast, but they've got, you have the doctor lady, you've got the family with the two young daughters, you've got the grumpy old guy and his wife.
Yep.
And you're right. They're like sort of minor characters in this bigger cast, and they each get a little bit of a highlight, which is different than you normally see.
Yeah.
And I will say, I think 2 hours was far too long for this particular film. But in any case, and I kind of felt like it was weird because to me there were very clear things that they could have edited, right? Like the things that kind of dragged on, it was almost like repeats of the same information, basically.
I'd like to talk about that a little more when we get to that point in the plot, but I do think that it afforded them ways to show that the plot wasn't gonna, yeah, it was a little bit repetitive, but it was also showing that the vampires tried to overcome them once and didn't succeed, and it took, like, and then they reset, and then it took another act for that
Right.
to, I don't know. I thought there was some interesting things that they were doing with it, but I also agree that it was lengthy. Another curveball that the directors and writers did was showing the what we find out to be air marshals like nodding at each other. I'm like, those are the Terrys, and I was wrong again.
Yep.
It was like, those weren't the Terrys, those were the good
Yep.
guys. So I thought that that was a fun little twist. This movie did that a few times, and then it became a different film.
Yeah, it was kind of like the beginning of the film Airplane, but just took a very different direction.
So this movie starts going off the rail, not off the rails, but so once the air marshals are taken out, as soon as you know that they're air marshals, they're basically all dead.
Mhm.
And we find out that 8 Ball is not well, we didn't know his name was 8 Ball. I don't know what we thought his name was, but Stefan or something, like
Yeah.
the flight attendant. He turns out to be a stabby guy and really enjoys stabbing people.
Yeah.
And we already see the dynamic between him and Carl, who Carl's always being like, dude, stop stabbing that guy so much. And 8 Ball's like, I'm going to keep stabbing.
Yeah, so this is the problem I had with the 8 Ball character, is that he, even from this very, like, I get that they were going to escalate, they're going to move really quickly, but they did it in such an extreme way. Like his level of craziness is so over the edge, and so like if their goal is to take over this plane, to keep people like in their seats and whatever, like he's going so far off the rails that I feel like there would have been much more outrage. Like at some point, the passengers are gonna, like, they're not gonna just be totally scared because this guy's going totally nuts. Like, and he's out of control. So as I said, it seemed unreal to me. Like, not, I felt like one of the other people would have taken him out. There was no reason to keep him alive. As far as, like, they didn't make him into this character where he was key to whatever plan they were doing.
The one time he did prove himself to be more effective was when he picked the most effective hostage to
Right.
get the cockpit open,
Right.
right? Even though that was horrible, but you don't see the boss say no, find a different person. He uses that hostage. So I think that's where the boss terrorist, Dominic Purcell, sees 8 Ball's value, is the fact that he is a complete psychopath.
In that instance, that made sense to me. It's like, okay, he chose this person, but in all of his other actions, he's so far over the top. From the get-go, from when like they're taking out the air marshals to when, and they keep, like, the boss guy keeps telling him to, like, calm down. He's not. So it's sort of like just a total, like, wild dog loose on this plane, basically. And then
Definitely.
obviously leading to, when he brings up Fareed, and the other guy who ends up being like the aeronautical student, and he brings them up to translate the Arabic message, like, because that to me was like, um he was so far over the top that, again, I just felt like they would have taken him out of it and they wouldn't have been letting him interact with people, because he does seem to be just totally crazy. And and all of them kind of give these like knowing glances to each other, or say, oh, remember when you did, like, oh, that crazy guy. And but it doesn't feel like any of them would have trusted him enough. I feel like somebody would have incapacitated him, but I guess you need him to kind of keep the action going. It just was, well, to me, a little too far over the top to make this like a compelling character.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, look, this movie is over the top. I think it's supposed to be over the top and cheesy, but this felt so like kind of far out of line that it kept taking me out of it. Like, oh, this guy is just a little too much. And then that's even leading up to the point where, Nadia is running after her son, and then gets like taken out by him, and in a really screwed up way, just a really just outsized reaction. What did you think about it? Maybe, am I too bothered by it? I mean, I guess he has to keep the momentum going, but it just felt a little too like, it was like somebody kept riling him up, and he was like, oh, you think I'm going to take it to here? I'm going to take it to like there, just like totally, like, everybody else was acting on a different plane than him, I guess.
I thought his character was necessary. As you've said, you need the unpredictable guy to drive that drama forward. And if he hadn't shot Nadia, she might not have ever revealed the fact that she's hiding this, terrible secret. Of course, she's also dealing with a Carl Grimes type son who runs off in the middle of a hostage
So
situation.
it's funny that you say that. I was like, never in the house, Elias.
Yep, Elias does not listen to grown-ups.
No.
He runs off more than once during this movie, for good, with good results and bad. And this first time, definitely bad. His mom gets shot 3 times and is left for dead. We've also started having her flashbacks even before the hostage situation started. She was starting to have her flashbacks of their snow day,
Mhm.
which is funny because she has these photos of the snow day that she sees that remind her of that day. And then that's also the day that she was turned into a vampire and her husband was killed. So it's like a little bit like, wait, you went and got your photos developed after that?
I
And
was
then,
thinking that too. I'm like, who keeps like a photo of that time? Like, that would probably be a really traumatic photo to have just hanging out. But I
it was their
mean,
last time together, I guess, as a family, but still, it does feel a little bit like you couldn't have picked a day or two before. but so yeah, so we're starting to get our flashback within a flashback, to show the day she gets turned. And I think the balance of it kind of gets played out a little bit during the middle of the movie.
yeah. Oh, but just going back to like when she gets shot by 8 Ball. So I thought how they were gonna play it is that he like accidentally shot her, didn't just totally like go trigger happy. Like, I thought they could have played it in a slightly different way. So that's my only objection to that. And then, with the flashbacks, the snow day flashbacks, like, again, like you, it didn't bother me so much that they were doing them. It just more bothered me that there was like so many of them. Um and I think that there were other parts. Probably if I was going to edit something out of this, it would be some of the action scenes on the plane. I do like the sort of ramp up to when it's revealed what she actually is. And they do this in conjunction with the flashbacks. And I thought that was well done, just kind of revealing what happened to her husband, what happened to her. It's a little bit of a slow burn to get there. And then when they get there, it's like, oh, wait, okay. So
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is, she's all like full on in vampire. And I thought that was kind of a cool thing to do. Um, again, the thing that was jarring to me was just how quickly 8 Ball figured it out. I do, as horrible as it was, I thought that the whole thing with the dogs was a good touch, only from the point of view where she tried to make it as if the dog had attacked people. She was definitely trying to sort of throw the other terrorists off the scent.
But she couldn't trick 8 Ball because he's got the intuition of a complete psycho.
Right, apparently.
Yeah,
But
but that her coming out of the cockpit after all of that back and forth, and the terrorists were about to jump out to go God knows where, because we never really find out what their whole plan
yeah,
was, which is kind of a funny element of this movie. But then they start turning the plane around because she's desperate to head west, and so they've turned the plane back towards Europe. And she and then finally the little girl hostage is held up in front of the cockpit door, which was 8-Ball's choice. But then she can't take it anymore. She's been drinking some blood, right, at this point, but only animal blood, I think.
Yep.
And Elias has been like, oh, you've been drinking blood, you got to take your medicine.
Yep.
I don't know that she gets a chance to take much of her medicine after this. It's pretty much just blood. And I think in the mythos of this story, the more blood you drink, the less human you are. And she has only managed to hold on to like her, her ability to speak and stuff, because she is extremely she's taking this clear liquid, which I don't know that we ever get identified. And I don't know, like she just steals it out of the other vampire's fridge at one point, and you're like, all right, I guess that's
a thing.
Now she knows that that's her medicine. But I think that that's kind of an interesting element to this movie. I don't know that she could come back at some point from when she keeps drinking the blood. Did you ever get a sense of that?
I don't think they went too far into it. I do think that eventually we see a flashback with the older vampire guy, like his son got killed. That was the one who bit her. And he basically implies that, as time goes on, it's very hard to fight against whatever this is. And it seems like he's okay, at least fairly okay and within his senses, but it's kind of a losing battle. I do think that part of her reason for trying to keep control is Elias, obviously. And I do think one of the best scenes was actually one of the flashbacks where, she's discovering what's happened to her after she, got bitten and whatever. And, she's got her baby and she's trying to like feed him and stuff, but he looks like a tasty snack. And so she's trying to like fight against that will. And so I think that her willpower is incredible, but I don't think that there's only so much you can do. And I think Elias is very cognizant of that. Like the more that she's sort of attacking these others, and the more that she's taking in, the less human she's becoming. And I think he takes heart in the fact that she has managed to hold on to her willpower. And there's even like moments like with Freed, and even with some of the other passengers, where she looks like terrifying. One of the funniest things is when she rescues the little girl and she's like, I'm not gonna hurt you, and she looks like absolutely terrifying, and the little girl of course goes running back into the rest of the plane. But so I thought that those were kind of like dark humor. There was a little bit of Dusk Till Dawn, some sort of happening, like some of that sense of humor, but I don't know that they always were striking the right balance. But there were definitely, like, I liked how she was a one vampire army basically. And
but she's also pretty, like, there are definitely scenes of her exhibiting signs of weakness. I guess she does shoot up some medicine in the bathroom after she initially fights the Terry's back. But then freaking 8-Ball gets a syringe of her blood because he's able to, he flashes her with the UV flashlight, and then takes a syringe of her blood, and you're just like, oh my god, this is
bad idea.
I mean, it's kind of tropey. I'm trying to think of examples of this in other films, but there's definitely examples of like the Psycho taking the superhero serum or whatever. I mean, like Hydra, I guess, is a good one. But this happens a fair amount, and you can see where this is going as soon as he has this idea. It's pretty bad.
But then that leads to some pretty crazy scenes. Like, she tries to do away with him in the car and burns him up, but then he has his master plan where he's just going to indiscriminately like take people and heal himself. And it's like, I definitely thought that, I think that there's some really cool elements to this. I think that even the sort of extra Scottish guy who keeps offering money to save his life and then decides to go and like offer himself up to the other vampires, hopefully so he can live. I thought that was a good twist and kept it going, right? Like, I thought that was a really good idea, because you could totally, especially, we don't know that much about this guy, but we know that that's exactly something that he would do.
He's kind of a jerk. That was actually the point where I feel like you could have just had the vampires come up the first time they tried to come up, when instead Nadia manages to kill Hightower, the vampire Hightower, and then they lock 8-Ball vampire in the basement. And like it could have just done away with that and had them roll through the car, the passenger compartment the first time that they
Right.
came up. And then like the movie probably would have been a good 15 minutes shorter if
Yeah,
they had done
easily.
that. Because there
Um,
is that whole lull, but in that lull, you also get to meet like that young American veteran
yep.
who's got the gun now, and he's like, "I'm here to help," and he has like some, he's helping cut off Fareed's arm
Yep.
and like tie him up. The doctor gets introduced during that scene where she starts to patch people up too, and there's just like a moment of quiet.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was interesting tonally, but I can also see why that was frustrating for people
Yeah.
who, and like Roger and Ebert, the website, their review of this was like 2 stars, and they were like, this should have been shorter and it should have just been a dumb action movie. Instead, they tried to make it about relationships of like Nadia and her son, and it should have been more action and less like quiet times. And I'm
Eh,
like, I don't know. I've seen that movie before. This was something different. And so I kind of like the fact that they took that pause in the middle.
yeah, and I actually think that, my only criticism, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that it was a little too long and it was just some of the repetition in terms of the action. I think you're right. I don't think we needed like 3 or 4 sieges of the vampires. I think we get the point. So
Yeah.
that could have been edited down, and you could have gotten them down on the ground, and figured out, and sort of continued this storyline. I do think that, there's an interesting sort of idea where the terrorists are basically making this seem as if this is like basically Middle Eastern terrorists, like just that trope, and kind of blaming it, and it's like people are making some assumptions about Fareed because of that. And it's, so there's like some themes in there where they're sort of playing upon people's biases. And but I think that those relationships, the relationships with her and her son, also with like some of the other the people and their kids on the plane, like I thought they did a pretty good job at that relationship building, given that there were some very brief moments with different characters. So I think if you
Yeah.
had taken that out, it would have been just hollow.
True. Of course, that little girl who she managed to save from the hostage situation at the cockpit door, absolutely is dead
Yeah, totally.
by the end of the movie. Like
But well, we won't
all
dwell
of
on that. But
the movie doesn't dwell on that either. Like you don't get any more shots of that little girl, but you just know that as somebody who gets to the end of this movie, you're like, oh God, they're all dead.
And I do think that one of the best scenes is the scene where like the final death match between Nadia and 8 Ball. And we've got Elias involved in this whole thing. The door's been blown off of the airplane, and it doesn't look good for Nadia. Like psychopath dude is really like just like taking her down. And then there's he's trying to get Elias, and she like there's this whole little thing between those 3 characters. I thought that the tension was really great. And then
Yeah, there's an interesting dynamic too between the very young vampires who are only like, I don't know, 20 minutes or maybe an hour
yeah.
younger than 8 Ball, and also Nadia.
Mhm.
Like when she runs out of the cockpit, the vampires run away from her,
Yep,
right?
because she's more
Um,
senior, I guess.
is it an age thing, or the fact that she's had more blood? And it does seem like the more you drink, the more
Yeah.
powerful and insane you get. But like Anne Rice vampirism is all about
Mhm.
age, right? Like and but usually it's measured in like hundreds and thousands of
Right,
years
right.
rather than 15
15
minutes.
minutes of blood
uh,
drinking. But I did like, I liked the payoff between the fight between her and 8 Ball. Like he's so unlikable, and so to see him like, and they do a little bit of a jump scare, like what they have, like he pulls himself in through the plane again, like this guy
yeah.
just won't die. And then you've got Fareed like totally contributing to this because he's like
Yeah.
watching the cameras. And
And what about those effects?
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I honestly, like the more blood that 8 Ball drank, his makeup or whatever CG they were doing, and same with Nadia's, it got really
Yeah,
impressive, I
no, it
thought.
looked great. I mean, that's, to me, that's where a lot of where they were putting their money. And then especially in the end when he gets kind of like, when the sunlight takes him out, it was like a really good moment. And also just how inhuman she looks in this moment. Her
Mhm.
son still wants to like hug her, and that whole like scene between the two of them where she keeps pushing him into the light, I thought was amazing. Really a good moment. And I I think that that was like a great way to sort of see, like, even as far gone as she was, she still wasn't completely gone, and she knew she was like a danger to him. And that was like a good way, I think, to like contrast that with the final scene. um so
Uh-huh.
I do think that this end is the thing I probably liked the least, because it was just so implausible. Suddenly, like, Elias is talking and he's saying insane things, and of course they think he's like in shock, or just who knows what's wrong with him. They're gonna, like, he keeps asking for Fareed, and they keep telling him that, oh no, he's a bad guy, which I thought was weird.
Because yeah, they have no idea. They
Right.
have
And
no information on Fareed, but they have his name somehow. Maybe they just have that from the manifest, but still. And suddenly he's had this teddy bear. Like we saw this teddy
right.
bear at the beginning of the movie. That's like he climbs down the airplane with a teddy bear. He never had a teddy bear.
No.
You see it. I guess it's in that final fight scene between 8 Ball and his mother. I don't know. I don't remember where it came from.
No, me neither.
And then like that this is the Deus Ex Machina for
Oh yeah.
him. That he's got something in there. They never check it.
Right.
I mean, I remember even thinking that when the soldiers first pull him away from the plane at the beginning of the movie, I'm like, they just give him a quick pat down. They're like, he's clear. I'm like, he's got a big ass bear with
Right.
him. Like,
Like, haven't you watched
gonna
The
look at that?
Rock? I mean, come on. Sorry.
Thought that was pretty funny. And then also like other ludicrous things that happen at the end of the movie is Fareed is getting driven away, and there's a weird Confederate battle flag hanging from the rearview mirror of that truck. I don't know what that was about in Scotland,
Right.
filmed in Germany. What the hell is going on here? So he's getting driven away, and he keeps yelling for Elias. And then after the plane explodes, spoiler alert, he gets up and he starts running for Elias. He's like, that boy belongs with me. I'm like, okay, that's a stretch. You guys have known each other for a couple of hours.
Yep.
And the soldiers just let him go.
That's
And
what
then,
I'm gonna say. Like, would they
yeah.
let him go when they're acting like this? I also noted the flag, and I thought that, oh gosh, is this gonna turn into something really bad? Like, was poor Fareed being like destroyed?
Is
Like,
he not in Scotland after all?
right.
Is
Like,
he
it
in...
was really, I was worried for him. So it just was an odd detail.
That was really weird
And
set dressing.
so,
Also, the fact that he got arrested instead of shot on sight in the
right.
airplane, I thought was pretty weird too.
Yeah. And then at the very end, he's like trying to embrace Elias with his hands, and like, he's and then they're like, just let him go. Like,
Uncuff him.
it was just, what are you even talking about? This whole thing just blew to high heaven, and like, you don't have any questions. You're just like,
including like two teams of your SWAT. I mean, they saw what was happening through their helmet cams, but not in great detail.
Right.
But that was mostly just Uncle Dougal going, what
What's happening?
What is happening? Sounded like Lieutenant Gorman from Aliens.
I know.
Epone.
Oh gosh. So I will say overall, I liked the effects. I thought that it was entertaining to watch. Like, I think it is, to me, it was like a fun action film to watch. Like, I don't like, even sort of my critiques of it are more just because it had so much potential, and I did enjoy it overall. And I think that the makeup and her like evolution into what she is at the very end, like the last scene where he's looking at her, she looks so freaking cool. Like, she's just totally, they've progressed it in a way that is just fascinating. I thought they did an incredible job. I also really liked the teeth and that effect, and the things that they showed with that were super creepy. And
their faces when they would roar would just get so bestial.
Yeah.
I thought that was an amazing effect, and I'm sure it was CG.
Oh yeah, but it looked good.
It was so seamless.
Helps that it was in the dark though too, like that the darkness helps a lot with that kind of thing. But still, I thought that she, and again, probably the makeup, hours in the makeup chair that she would have had to have dealt with. It's probably crazy, but I thought she did a great job. But overall, I would be fine if this, like, there was some kind of a series, like, there's things to be explored in this particular world if you've got vampires going on like this. So maybe that is something that you would see. Maybe this was a teaser to see if it would get picked up by Netflix. It wouldn't shock me if they optioned to do something with it. So
maybe it does feel a little bit final at the end, since all the vampires are blown up, including Mama. And like Blood Red Sky, the sequel would have to be like, it would be really weird if it was another one on a plane. I don't know.
Oh, I don't think it would be like this. I think what I was thinking is like the premise of a series is in like this world where, that old dude and his son in the woods came from somewhere, so
unless they were the last two also. I mean, but also we can consider that Farid was bitten. Sure, they cut off his hand,
I was
but
thinking is that maybe he's battling it and there's other stuff happening. So I don't know. There's a little window open, but it's fine if it's just a little bottle episode of a film too. So
and maybe it's better off that way, especially if the dude just had this idea while he was on a plane. He was like, that's his entire idea, and maybe we shouldn't try to fit more in there. But I enjoyed it too. I really thought that this was good. I too think that it could have been a few minutes shorter, but then I think that I did like I've already said, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I did like some of those other elements that they managed to fit in there. And I thought I very rarely see a movie that has it does follow a certain formula, but it breaks from it to introduce all these other characters who I thought added a lot of depth and breadth and like color to the film.
I agree. So I'm favorable to this film. And I really like the cast a lot, and I'll say that they do seem like they're having a lot of fun. Like they do. So
especially 8-Ball.
Especially 8-Ball.
That dude is cray.
So anything more to say on this one?
No, I think that wraps us up. The question, HA, is, are we ready to start reviewing the final season of The Walking Dead?
I think we should be ready. Let's do it.
Please, Reanimators, come back and join us next time on Reanimated. We're going to be starting to talk about season 11, the final season of the Walking Dead television show Prime. God knows there'll be plenty of other Walking Dead stuff out there until they beat that dead horse and it reanimates. So get at us on Twitter, Reanimated PCast. Email us with your thoughts about Blood Red Sky or anything at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, and show notes are at reanimatedpodcast.com for those.
And until next time, ciao.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you. And
it's 300 episodes strong.
Woohoo! All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.